We're so glad to have you back for another episode of WVU Energy Express on West Virginia Public Broadcasting and YouTube. I'm your host, Zach Harold. Earlier this week, we met up with a bunch of our friends to learn all about homes. Well, today we're going to head outside and learn about the homes of some of our West Virginia critters. Our wildlife here in the Mountain State call many things home. Trees, dens, fallen logs, even streams. And that's where we're going to start our day, learning all about our state fish, the brook trout.
Hello everyone, I am Sheldon Owen, Extension Wildlife Specialist with WVU Extension Service. Today we are joined with Cory and Emilee Briggs, who are both graduate students here at West Virginia University in the Fisheries program. So, Cory, Emilee, tell us a little bit about what you do. I guess back up and tell us where you're from and what brought you here to WVU.
I'm Cory Bauerlein again. I'm originally from Maryland, did my undergraduate research at Coastal Carolina University as well as my master's research, working with a lot of muskie and other species like that. But I came here to WVU because I got the opportunity to work with these amazing fish here on the stream, so we hold West Virginia.
I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. I did my master's at NC State in fisheries, and I loved it so much that I decided to do my PhD. And all of my experience has been in stream work, so it just made sense to come someplace and learn about cold water streams, which are very different from a lot of the warm water streams in North Carolina.
Okay, awesome. And today we're looking at brook trout, which, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only native trout species here in West Virginia. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So why do we stock most of our trout streams with rainbow trout or tiger trout instead of brook trout for fishery purposes?
We do a lot of stocking of those rainbow trout and brown trout, the non-natives, because they're easier to propagate, to sort of raise and stock in those areas. As well as a lot of the times people think they are a beautiful fish, they're good to eat. Also makes it really easy to tell that they are from outside of the system. So there's a lot of different reasons, but primarily to increase angler opportunities.
You all are both working with applied research projects, right? And so you're working here in the lab and also in the field, hopefully to improve our fisheries in the state of West Virginia. How does your research play into that? Or what will be the end result of your research to say, here's how we can better the system, or here's what we've learned?
I am looking at wild populations of trout in the state, primarily in like the Mon National Forest region. And I'm trying to identify their movements and their spawning or their reproduction habits. So hopefully by the end of my dissertation on my PhD, I'll be able to tell managers and other biologists who are out there actively doing, like working on the trout, doing habitat improvements. One, are the trout moving from these headwater streams where they live out to the big areas? Can we help reconnect them to these areas? And then are they able to reproduce? And if so, is it, do they have good habitat? Or do they have good eggs, or are they struggling in some areas?
Okay. So my research is focused mostly here in the lab, working with these brook trout behind us as well. Mostly looking at their ability to grow at higher temperatures. So my goal is to look at what happens long-term in the face of climate change, see what happens to their growth potential, things like that in the wild, sort of model that out, look long-term, see what's going to happen to our populations, and see if there's potential for any sort of genetic addition to these populations to make them stronger in the face of, long-term climate change.
Awesome. Thank you both for the research that you do, and hopefully this will improve fisheries for this in the coming years. What is the difference between a cold water fish and a warm water fish?
Mostly where they're living. So cold water and warm water describes exactly that, the type of water that they live in. So cold water species like brook trout need that cold groundwater fed water. So if you, even in the summer, we have to set these temperature loggers in these sites, and you have to put your head underneath the water, and it is so cold that even in the summer you can get a brain freeze while you're down there snorkeling, like trying to put these temperature loggers in the water. So that's, I think, the best way to physically think about it. Whereas warm water might be where you see more like bluegill, brim, things like that. So it's just about how cold is it, how well is it.
Cory, we have an example of a brook trout here.
Yes, sir.
Talk about some distinguishing characteristics. How would I know this is a brook trout compared to another fish?
The distinguishing marks that separate a brown trout versus a brook trout are that the way that I learned at least is that brook trout are dark with lighter spots, whereas brown trout are light with darker spots. So this brown trout will be like a lightish tan to almost a cream color with relatively dark spots around. So if we look at this guy in comparison, we've got those really, really dark colors in the background with the lighter spots in the forefront. Also, this fish here, he's a male. You see the real dark belly right here. It almost comes down to a taper of the belly. Males will generally be a lot more vibrantly colored, especially during the fall, during their breeding season. That's one of their secondary characteristics that allow them to compete with other males to, be able to spawn. We have these worm-like patterns up here at the very, very top. These are feisty.
The fun of working with fish.
Oh yeah. So those worm-like patterns called vermiculations generally oscillate between like a darker green to a lighter green. This guy, being from our lab, is a little bit devoid of color, mainly because of the way that they like to hang out in those labs. But they will be a lot more vibrantly colored, especially in the fall. See those pink spots right here where my finger is with a slight blue halo? Those really, really pop in the fall, as well as these white lead fins with a black line. One of the features that are relatively unique to trout species and other salamanders are these fins back here. This adipose fin made up of a lot of fatty tissue is right here.
Thank you all very much for coming out and joining us this morning. Thank you all for joining us. And as you go out and explore our wild and wonderful waters of West Virginia, hopefully you'll be able to see a brook trout out there across the landscape of West Virginia.
For this next segment, our friends Sheldon and Dave are going to lead us a little bit away from the stream and into the forest to learn about the critters who find their homes in rotten logs. Sounds gross? Probably is. Let's check it out.
Hello everyone, I am Sheldon Owen, Extension Wildlife Specialist with the West Virginia University Extension Service. Today we are at the West Virginia University Research Forest right outside of Brewston Mills. I'm along with my colleague,
Dave McGill. I'm the Forest Resources Extension Specialist, and today we're going to be looking at some of these logs that are down on the forest floor and kind of seeing what kind of habitats they create for organisms and plants and things like that.
Well, when we're thinking about habitat out in our forests, what are the three main components of habitat? Food, water, and shelter. Or a lot of times when we talk about wildlife, we talk about cover, because they don't build their own shelter. They just use what is available to find cover, to find protection. And one of the things we commonly overlook are just these down, rotten logs, trees that have fallen in the woods, or a limb that has fallen off, and as it is sitting on the forest floor, it's decaying, it's rotting, and it creates this great little microhabitat, if you will, because it's providing cover for a lot of our small salamanders, maybe even mice, rodents, voles that could be using this. And as it decays, it's also creating a great place for insects. So as insects are growing inside of these logs and they're feeding on some of these logs as they are decaying, and it's providing protection for those as well.
Yeah, one of the organisms that sometimes we overlook when we see one of these large logs on the forest floor are the fungi, and they are actually the ones creating this habitat. Different types of wood decay fungi, they get in there, their little strands of hyphae grow and decompose the wood and make it softer and absorb more moisture for, creating your microsites for these small creatures.
So it doesn't look like much, right? And when this tree fell, it made a noise or not, or made a sound or not, it's definitely an important component of our forest and woodland floors across West Virginia. And it doesn't have to be a very large log, if we look along the length of this one, this is a tree that is fallen over, but it could just be a limb or some bark, it's exfoliating bark that is fallen off. Anything that creates that cover can create a microhabitat for a lot of different species.
You know, the moss creates the initial habitat. Of course, it holds moisture very well. And if you look under here, it's actually probably developing a little soil. But these little birch seedlings, they'll grow and they'll put roots down, and the roots will extend all the way down into the ground. And then when the log decomposes, you'll have these trees called stool trees that are kind of standing, and they can be 6, 8 feet tall. Yeah, so if you are collecting moss for a terrarium or a fairy garden, something like that, you just kind of come up to the log, lift it up, and it comes up in a mat. But you don't want to take too much because you want to leave a space, and you want to leave some other plants, other moss here, so it regenerates that spot that you collect it from. So if you look under here, you can see a lot of this material that's already decomposed on the tree itself. You can see you can actually pull some of this stuff up. It's actually very soft materials, like compost. And so, you know, all these white things, that's fungi that's continuing to break that down and create a better, you know, habitat for small little creatures.
So if you were to take all of the salamanders that are around here and the reptiles that are around here on our forest floor and kind of pile it up, the biomass that will result from that is larger than piling up all the birds or piling up all the mammals that are found down here. So, you know, it's always a good idea. Maybe you can see that my hands are still wet, because these amphibians will absorb any type of chemical or water and even oxygen through their skin. If we're handling these with dry hands, we're actually drying the salamander out. And so you want to make sure that your hands are wet when you're handling these. It makes it a little bit more difficult because they are pretty quick and slick. It can escape quite easily, but you don't want to dry them out. And also keep in mind that whatever you have on your hand, if you have lotions or any type of perfume or anything that could be on your hand, that amphibian is now absorbing it when you're holding it like this. When it's, you know, the temperature is right and we have a little bit of rainfall, it's moist enough, these will come out and walk around on the forest floor. So you'll actually see them on top of the leaf litter that's on the ground. But because they have to stay in moist environments, as the leaf litter dries out or the conditions above ground dry out, they'll actually dig down into the ground looking for that moisture. And it could be 6 inches to a foot, maybe even 2 feet deep, that they're digging down looking for that moisture to find the perfect environment, the perfect habitat for them to stay moist and stay alive. So what we found here is a juvenile form of our red-spotted newt. You can see the red spots along its back with kind of the black outline. Now these are juvenile, and we talked about how most of our amphibians, the young are in water and the adults are on land or can be on land, whereas the red-spotted newt, the juveniles are on land, and they can stay on land in this phase, and this is called the red eft phase, for maybe 2 years or more, 2 to 4 years. And so they're just walking around. You can see they're a little bit drier. They still need some moist conditions, but they're a little bit drier and can handle drier conditions than many of our other salamanders. But if you look at this coloration, that lets us know that there's something different about this species, and it is slightly toxic. So if a bird or something were to come along, or a snake to come along and try to eat this, you know, it's very bitter tasting, so it will actually spit that out. It won't kill the animal if they eat it, but it can make them sick and gives them a bad taste. And if you pick these up, it won't make you sick, but it's always a good idea to make sure you wash your hands after you handle any animal to make sure that you're not picking up anything that it could be carrying. So when you're out flipping over logs, maybe flipping rocks, you know, always be careful because you don't know what's underneath it. We do have some venomous snakes, 2 species of venomous snakes that occur here in West Virginia, and we don't want you to be bitten by those. So whenever you're flipping a log or flipping a rock, you always want to kind of flip it and roll it towards you. So if there's a snake on the opposite side, you know, it's away from you, and you can, you know, if you needed to, you could quickly drop it back in and keep yourself protected. But just, you know, keep in mind that we do have venomous snakes out there, and be safe. Be snake aware when you're out in the woods looking around to make sure that you're protecting yourself. Never pick up a snake, because we always want to know, you know, they're fun to handle and they're fun to see, but you always want to know and make sure which species of snake it is, because these venomous snakes can bite and will bite if you pick one up, and it could cause some serious harm.
Okay, I think today we looked around at some of these logs, what's under them, the small microsites of these trees that have fallen, and creating great places for small creatures to live.
Found some pretty interesting critters so far. We found a eastern redback salamander, the red F stage of the eastern spotted newt, and we also found What else did we find?
Slimy, but it got away.
We saw a slimy salamander, but we missed it. We found one of our dusky salamanders out here. So it's a great opportunity to get out and explore and find some new critters. Across West Virginia, we have 35 different species of salamanders. Now they don't occur everywhere, so some only occur in small areas, like the Cheat Mountain salamander only occurs up in high elevations around Cheat Mountain. And so you may not find it. And so as you go out in your backyards and explore, there may be some different salamanders that you may find. But remember, as you're going out and you're looking, we encourage you to explore and find these things, but always leave the habitat, the area, as you found it. And so if you flip a rock over, flip a log over, always put it back and place it where you found it, because something's using that for protection and for cover. And keep your hands wet and keep your hands clean when you're handling these, because those salamanders are absorbing whatever's on your hands. And you can dry them out if you're handling them with dry hands. But we definitely encourage you to get out and explore, find the mushrooms, the fungi that are out there, the salamanders that are out there, insects that we really didn't talk about today.
One of the funnest things you could do here in West Virginia, explore the forest.
Cheap, easy, and a lot of fun, because you'll never know what you're going to find out there.
What do you say we get up and moving a little bit? Today we're going to go over the river and through the woods to Granny's house. That's right, this one is all about Little Red Riding Hood.
Hi, I'm Molly. Welcome to Wonderland Workouts. Today we're going to be exercising to Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who was loved by everyone, but no one loved her more than her grandmother. Once her grandmother gave her a beautiful red cape. She loved it so much that she wouldn't wear anything else. One day, her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood. Here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take it to your grandmother, for she is ill and weak and would love to see you. Set out before it gets too hot. Walk quietly and nicely on the path. You don't want to fall and break the bottle of wine, because then grandmother will get nothing. When you get there, wish her a good morning." "I will take great care," said Little Red Riding Hood, and off she skipped into the forest. The grandmother lived in the woods outside the village. And just as Little Red Riding Hood entered the woods, a wolf met her. "Good day, Little Red Riding Hood." "Why are you away so early, Little Red Riding Hood?" "I'm going to my grandmother's." "What have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day and my grandmother is ill. This will surely make her feel better." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Red Riding Hood?" "A good mile further down the road." "Surely you must know where it is." While Little Red Riding Hood is picking flowers for her grandmother, the wolf runs ahead to grandmother's house. The wolf knocked on the grandmother's door, and grandmother answered. "Who's there?" "Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf. "I have brought you cake and wine so that you'll feel better." "Lift the latch," replied the grandmother. "I am weak and cannot get up." The wolf lifted the latch, came into the house, and when grandmother saw it was a wolf, she got up, sprang to the closet, and hid. The wolf got the grandmother's clothes and got into her bed, waiting for Little Red Riding Hood to arrive. Little Red Riding Hood had been running and collecting flowers when she realized that she had to get to her grandmother's house. She was surprised to find the cottage door open when she arrived. She She called out, "Good morning," but received no answer. She stepped inside the house and realized how strange her grandmother looked. "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my child." "But grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my child." "But grandmother, what large hands you have." "The better to hug you with, my child." "Oh, but grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with, my child." The wolf jumps out of bed to gobble up Little Red Riding Hood. Just then, a woodsman was out in the forest and heard the commotion at the grandmother's house. He saw that the door was open and the wolf was in the bed dressed as the grandmother. And the huntsman said, "Why are you attacking my friends?" Then, just as the wolf lunges at the woodsman brings down the axe onto the wolf's toe. The wolf howls and hops out the door, never to be seen again. The end.
All this walking around in the woods has got me pretty thirsty. Let's head over to the kitchen where Molly is whipping up a tasty, refreshing drink.
Hi, I'm Molly with West Virginia University Extension Family Nutrition Program, and today we're going to make a watermelon slushy bowl. I have already washed my hands, cleaned my cooking surface, so I'm ready to get started. So for this recipe, we need a couple of watermelons. I've got a personal sized one that is seedless for the most part. I've already washed it. You want to be sure to wash the outside of melons even though you're not eating the outside, because your knife is going from the outside through what you are eating. So if it's dirty, you're dragging all of that through what you do eat. So I have a nice chef's knife and I'm going to cut my watermelon right in half. And if you're cooking at home, you want to be sure to ask your parents' permission before you use sharp knives or the blender or your stovetop, because it's really important to be safe in order to have fun in the kitchen. So if I were cutting a watermelon just to cube it into chunks, I would turn my watermelon over because I would want to cut on my, to have a flat surface. But since we're making slushy bowls and this is going to be my bowl to hold my drink, I'm going to scoop out this watermelon and I'm going to just put this into a bowl. And you want to do this until it's pretty nice and clean and dried out before we add our slushy to it. So it might take some elbow grease. And you do want to make sure you do this with a spoon or nothing that's going to puncture the bottom, because we are going to use this as our receptacle for our slushy. And then I went ahead and prepared another one and froze those chunks. So I've got some that are not frozen and some that are frozen. Our other ingredients that we need for our watermelon slushy bowls are limes or lime juice and some honey and coconut water. So the first thing I'm going to do is prep our lime for our lime juice. I smashed it and rolled it on my countertop to free up the juices. and I should get about 1-ish tablespoons per half, just depending on how big your lime is. Now we're going to add our honey straight into the lime juice before we do the blender. It'll just make it easier to pour out. And we need a tablespoon of honey. So now we're going to add our non-frozen watermelon first to our blender. That'll just make it easier to mix and not be as hard on your blender. I'm going to go ahead and scoop out the other half of my watermelon. I'm going to blend up my non-frozen watermelon first a little bit to make room for my frozen. Okay, now I'm going to add my frozen chunks. Now I'm going to blend up my non-frozen and frozen chunks. And our last step is to add our lime juice and honey mixture. And our coconut water. And I might just use this because it has measurements. 4 tablespoons is a 1/4 cup. I love coconut. Now here comes the fun part. I've got my 2 watermelon bowls, and I'm gonna pour my slushy in. You could garnish this with some more lime slices. They are frosty and delicious. What a perfect drink for the summer. I hope you give this recipe a try and join me again sometime real soon.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of WVU Energy Express. After all that exploring, I think I'm going to head home and take a nap. We'll see you right back here next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.